I'm Ben with Hip Visual Solutions, and today on Technique Tuesday, we're here with Ben Pouncey, band director of Ashley Ridge High School, and he takes us through movement basics for your marching band.
Hi, I'm Ben Pouncey, and today we're going to look at a very simple visual exercise that has a lot of different benefits. The first one being it gives you a pretty substantial foundation that you can start to build in other fundamentals of movement and marching. The second one being it can be done with minimal space. So whether you're inside, maybe in a gym, or even spread out in the band room, you can still take this exercise and get a lot of benefit from it for your students. And then the third benefit of this would be that it provides a pretty substantial platform that you can start to layer in other responsibilities on top of the movement and the marching that you're doing. So in other words, you get a lot of bang for your buck when you start using this exercise with your students. In terms of scaffolding this exercise into your movement curriculum, you want to make sure that before you introduce this, that your students already have an understanding of body carriage, they already have an understanding of alignment in terms of the joints and the parts of their bodies that they have to control. They also want to make sure that they have an understanding of lift, in other words, being able to separate the upper and lower body. All of those skills, whether they're introduced with some sort of posture exercise, I know a lot of people like to use the Hindu posture exercise, all of those skills transfer into what we're about to look at. So you want to make sure you spent a substantial amount of time already with your students talking about posture, body carriage, as well as engaging their core body muscles so that they can take those skills into what we're about to look at. The three big topics we're going to look at in this video are going to be, the first one, how to point the toe correctly and essentially do a tendu. The second one is going to be how to take that skill and then build on that into how to transfer the weight from one foot to the next. And then the third one is going to be how to flex our ankle when taking that step so that we can start to build the roll step into our marching technique. So the exercise is in three parts, and when you first start to introduce this exercise with your students, it's probably best to isolate each individual skill and then start to put it to counts so that they can get lots of repetitions going through each different segment. So you first of all want to start with feet in first position. The reason I think this is important is because since so much of what we are doing now with marching band has some movement and dance-based skills built into it. This is a great foundation for which they can do other things outside of just taking steps forward, back, left, and right. And then the other reason I think this is important is because it also provides a much more substantial base for them to stand on versus heels and toes all the way together. Just opening up to make sure that both feet are at 45 degrees gives them a nice foundation that they can build their posture from. And so this is where we want to start. So again, they already have an idea of alignment, engaging their core body muscles, making sure that they're separating the upper body from the lower body. And then the first skill that we talk about in the exercise is how to point the toe, and in other words, basically how to do a tendu. So they don't need their instruments for this at first. If you could have them either hold their hands down by their side, or sometimes a good check is to make sure that their hands are on their hips so that they can really make sure that they are engaging those muscles and lifting up out of their hips and staying really light on their feet. And so the first thing they want to do is they want to push their toe forward while keeping their little toe in contact with the ground and making sure that their shoelaces are pointing up and out. And we're doing this with the left foot first. You could practice it on both sides, but since they're probably going to be stepping off with their left foot when they're marching, it's probably best to start with the left side. So again, they push the little toe forward. One of my teachers used to say, pretend like you've got a quarter underneath your toe and you're just trying to push that quarter forward. And some things you want to look out for when they first start doing this is that they'll, in an effort to try and keep everything straight from their waist down, they're going to want to lean back. And so like if I show that to you from the side, they're trying to keep their legs straight so their upper body goes back. And so you want to really make sure you're enforcing those points of alignment that you've already talked about with your posture, and making sure that the movement of that foot, that they maintain alignment in their upper body as well as their lower body. They also want to make sure that in an effort to keep that left leg straight as it comes forward, that they're not bending the right leg to get that foot to come out. So we want to make sure legs stay straight, little toe stays in contact with the ground, push the quarter forward, and upper body maintains alignment throughout the course of that exercise. So they need a lot of repetitions just doing that. You could do it slowly at first, but then I would move it into doing it in one count. So in other words, you could give them a count off, 5, 6, 7, 8, point, and get them to experience what it feels like to get the initiation of that foot forward, toes staying low to the ground, push the quarter forward, and get them comfortable with doing that in just one count. So once the students are comfortable with that initial tendu step, you can start to then move into the next part of the exercise, which is going to deal with actually pushing off and essentially taking a step forward. But the main focus of this part of the exercise is how to actually transfer the weight from a standing position to that very first step. So we've already discussed the proper technique for tendu. Essentially what we're going to do now is, instead of just putting the foot out and not putting any weight in the front foot, we're actually going to push off and actually distribute the weight into both feet. So you first of all want to talk about that initiation and that initial push, which, depending on the tempo, should probably be coming or start on the downbeat before that first step. So if they're going to step off on 1, we want to talk about pushing off on count 4. So if the count off is 5, 6, 5, 6, 7, we're going to push on 8 so that we can get our foot to where it needs to be on 1. So in terms of the mechanics, what the body's going to be doing is similar to what it was doing with the tendu, but now we're going to transfer the weight so that the weight is evenly distributed between both feet. This is where we can really make sure that we're talking about not crossing that front leg in front of the right leg, whether you call it staying in their ski lines or staying in track. We want to make sure that the ankle bones are staying in their own track, so we're not crossing one foot in front of the other. The other thing we want to talk about is similar to the last part of the exercise. We want to make sure that our lower body is staying straight. We're not bending that knee before we take that initial push forward. It's also really important to talk about where the weight is distributed in your feet and in your lower body before taking that first step. So sometimes it's a good idea to have the students experiment and experience leaning to the right, leaning to the left, leaning forward, leaning back, because before they take that first step, they want to make sure that more of the weight is in the right side of their body, and that the majority of the weight is in the platform of their foot. So if you think about 60% of the weight being forward, 40% of the weight being back. So that way they don't lean back before stepping forward, and that they get a really strong initiation. So again, the way that this part of the exercise will work, I'll show it again from the side. Once they've done the tendu and come back in, they'll get the next part, which will be 5, 6, 7, push, point. And so they're still articulating the ground with the pinky toe, the front part of their foot. Their feet are still turned out at 45-degree angles. It's very similar to the first part of the exercise. The only thing that's changed is that now we're distributing the weight between both feet. And so they want to make sure that they've got their weight 50-50 distributed. So we've got 50% of the weight in the front, 50% of the weight in the back. We also want to talk about in this step that they're also taking their entire upper body with them. So imagine they've got a lasso or something tied around the center part of their chest. They want to make sure that all of that goes with them on that first step and they actually travel forward. Some tendencies they tend to have is that they take that step and, kind of like the first part of the exercise, they want to lean back or not actually take their body with them. So we want to make sure that their entire upper body is going with them in that first step so that they actually travel somewhere. This is a great opportunity also to maybe do some partner exercises, have the students partner up and watch their partner and see if they're actually taking that step correctly and traveling. And if they have the opportunity to look for those common mistakes or common tendencies, they'll tend to start to take that into account with their own marching. So once the students have an understanding of the first and second part of the exercise, we're going to move on to the third part, which is where they're essentially taking their first step forward with the marching technique. And so we want to make sure that they take all the concepts and principles that they learned in the first and second part and just apply it to the third part of the exercise. The only thing that's changing is that instead of hitting the ground with our toe first, we're going to be flexing our ankle and making sure that our heel is actually hitting the ground first. They want to be thinking about the same thing as that they were thinking about in part 2. They want to make sure that the weight is forward in their feet. that it's a little bit more to the right so that they can get their left foot out with a good initial step. They want to make sure that their waist, from the waist down, stays nice and straight, and that they keep their upper body nice and lifted. And so the push off and the vocals that they use are all going to be the same. Again, the only thing that's changing is we're going to flex our ankle so that our heel is actually hitting the ground first. So the vocals and the count off will still be 5, 6, 5, 6, 7, push, 1. And you might want to even think about changing up what they say here, maybe something like push and flex, or something as a reminder that they're actually going to flex their ankle and pull their toe back. Similar things to look for. We want to make sure that they're not breaking that alignment when they take that first step, that they keep their right leg straight on that push off. And we also want to make sure that the left leg stays straight as it comes forward as well. So what they felt in that first step forward and the second part of the exercise where they were building off that tendu, that should feel the same. All that's changing is we're going to pull the toe back, keep our heel really low to the ground, and make sure that our left leg stays straight as it goes forward. So they want to get a lot of repetitions on that first step before we put all of these steps together in the exercise. Once they feel comfortable with that first step, they get very comfortable with distributing the weight evenly between both feet. We want to talk about the contact points that they should be experiencing here. With their left foot, the heel is in contact with the ground. With the right foot, the heel should have come off the ground just a little bit, and they've got their weight 50-50 distributed between both feet. They can rock back and forth, feel what it feels like to put all the weight into the front, all the weight into the back, and then find 50-50. Let them experience those extremes and then bring them back to, okay, what does 50-50 feel like? And let them feel what it feels like to balance between those two checkpoints. Once they have a lot of repetitions of that, we can go back and put all the steps of the exercise together.
I'd like to give a special thank you to Ben Pouncey for joining us today on Technique Tuesday. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our YouTube channel for more great videos like these. Follow us on social media at Hit Visual and visit our website, www.hitvisualsolutions.com, to book custom costumes, flags, props, and more for your program. We'll see you next week.